Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. Tonight, we've got a mailbag show coming your way. Earlier this week, we broke down the offensive game film, took a look into some of the things Daniel Jones has done to progress as a quarterback within the system, among other things on the offense. If you go to our YouTube page, you can literally watch the film with us. Did the same thing for the defensive side of the ball with Dexter Lawrence and other players standing out. Later this week, little preview of the Jaguars game. Might be before you hear this, depending on if you're listening or watching. This mailbag will hit YouTube before it hits podcast form. We like to do the mailbag last for the week, let it sink in over the weekend. Some nice listening for the weekend, more 30,000-foot view thoughts on the Giants. So, Nick, without further ado, let's dive right into this bad boy. We'll start with a question from Derek Bentley, who asks, what do you guys think Kayvon Thibodeau's ceiling is after the sample size you've seen so far?
I think Kayvon Thibodeau has a high ceiling, Dan. I think he's still progressing. I think he could still add more moves, inside counter moves and things like that to his pass rushing arsenal. I think he's doing a good job leveraging his burst, his explosiveness off the snap to win high side. Does a good job with his inside hand to chop the outside arm of offensive tackles, and then does an excellent job getting that outside hand underneath or that inside hand underneath whichever direction he is going in to basically land the rip move to get the tackle off balanced. And I still, like I said, think there's room to grow. I think as a run defender, he's been, I would say, solid overall. There are times where he gets caught out of position, but overall, I think he has displayed everything that we wanted to see from a player like Kayvon Thibodeau, a top 10 pick, somebody who was injured earlier in the season, steps in, and I feel like now he's hitting the ground running, and we should only see development here on out. And I think the ceiling is high.
Yeah, I also think the ceiling is high. I think, look, the first step, that initial first step that Thibodeau has, that's his defining trait, and it will be. But there are some things that I've already seen on film in this small sample size that stand out to me as good, positive developments as far as evaluating his future. One, power. I feel like he's been more powerful at the point of contact within getting off of these blocks than I thought he would be. Also, the hand usage. The hand usage is further along than not only I expected, but it should be, I think, for a rookie at this time. But most importantly for me, he's had some really good football savvy plays, some high IQ football plays. We talked about the one last week where he kind of, takes the step down, forces Lamar Jackson to go outside, or I believe hand the ball off. Then he takes the runner outside by taking the step and walling him back inside, and then makes the tackle on his own. We talked about that on last night's film. That's a great high IQ play. He's had multiple high IQ plays, and they've used him a few times now, Nick, to drop in coverage, and I feel like he's been pretty fluid and looked pretty fast and quick doing that. He hasn't had a big play yet in coverage, but I feel like he's going to get his hand on a ball very soon and make a play there where people are going to be like, damn, we got a guy who can rush the passer and if we need him to, drop in coverage. So ceiling remains high for me. It's pretty on par with where I thought coming out of the draft.
We got to say it's exciting too, because Azeez Ojulari was somebody we really liked. The Giants ended up getting him in the second round, and I felt like early in the season we started seeing those glimpses of Azeez Ojulari. Unfortunately, right now he is injured. But think about when Azeez Ojulari comes back and he's healthy, and then you have Azeez on one side, Kayvon on another, with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams occupying the middle. We brought this up a couple podcasts ago, but this defensive line could be really real and really scary, and it could force offenses to really be in a predicament whenever they have to scheme against them.
Yep. All right, Jake Andrews asked, do you think it's still possible to win a Super Bowl with a game manager system type quarterback? Or do you need someone more dynamic? Do you thinking it might be, he says, I'm thinking it might be worth it to build around a solid but not great quarterback and invest the money a star quarterback will cost on increasing depth elsewhere.
I think having a star quarterback enhances your chance. That just isn't necessarily a total novel idea, but I still think you can win with somebody who is a game manager. You just need so many things to kind of break your way, and you need that said game manager to not kill you and not make mistakes and just keep the offense within rhythm and keep the offense from really imploding upon itself. Because what is a game manager? Like there are quarterbacks who have led teams to Super Bowls in the past off the backs of good defenses and things like that. But I'm not really like, yes, you need Josh Allen, you need Patrick Mahomes, and those guys are going to help, but you can defeat those quarterbacks, but you just need really good coaching, really good preparation, the defense to play to their potential, and then the quarterback not to kill you while also making plays. But does that make him a game manager if he is making said plays? Like, I don't really know. Is he Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes? Obviously not, but there's still gray room between those two things.
Sure. And I think it's possible to win a Super Bowl with a system quarterback game manager type. We've seen it Nick Foles. We've seen it with several quarterbacks over the years. It's just not likely, or I guess it's not easy to be consistent Super Bowl winner. And why is that? Well, there really isn't a market that dictates it. So, for example, there's not like these clear drop-offs with you got the Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and then you got like, let's say, the Jared Goff and the Derek Carrs, and then let's say maybe you want to put another quarterback tier under that. They don't really get paid very differently. That's the biggest problem here. There's no such thing as, oh, we know this guy's kind of mediocre system game manager type, so we'll pay him a certain amount and we'll be able to move forward with that, like you said, and then spend that money elsewhere. No. That's not how it works. Look at the contract Jared Goff got. Look at the contract Ryan Tannehill got. Look at the contract Kirk Cousins got. Look at the contract Derek Carr got. And the Carr one's probably the last one because they can get out of that. But you got to pay these guys, and it's not like there is like this gray or this like extra incentive to settling in on one of these players, because ultimately you don't save much. Like, you may save a little bit, if anything, but that wasn't the case with Jared Goff. When he got his new deal, it was like top of the market. Ryan Tannehill got an absolutely absurd deal as well, and now they're
Andy
paying
Dalton, Colin Kaepernick
right.
back in the day.
Both there is no such thing really as a quarterback market. That's the problem with this plan. So that's why people say when you got to pay when you pay the quarterback, you really don't want to be you're hoping, and it's hard. You're hoping to get one of these top 5 guys who can be top 5 consistently year after year, because otherwise you settle into that Raiders, Titans, Vikings range where there's no money left on the cap because you didn't really save much to begin with this quarterback. And how far can he take you? So far, that has been not very far for those 3 teams.
But isn't there wiggle room away from that? Like, I feel like the NFL has learned from the Jared Goff contract and contracts like that, because the way it was like the agents were really influencing these players to accept these big deals, or at least drive for these big deals. And the teams were always like kind of capitulating, like, okay, it's a time for a young quarterback to get paid, to reset the quarterback market. And it's like everybody around the league is looking, hey, it's your turn to reset the market so the next guy can get paid even more, and then it can keep progressing in that manner. It's somewhat similar to what Lamar Jackson is going through right now, albeit that situation is really odd because the Browns totally screwed up the entire NFL landscape in terms of paying quarterbacks by giving Deshaun Watson that deal. And I can ensure that 31 owners are very, very, very pissed at Jimmy Haslam and the Browns right now. But I think with a quarterback like Daniel Jones, there's wiggle room there because there's not a huge demand or market for Daniel Jones, I think, around the NFL. I think his place is here in New York. And Daniel Jones, I don't think he's going to be like, okay, well, I want Deshaun Watson money. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. So how much are you willing to pay the quarterback like Daniel Jones, whose definite best place is right here in New York with Brian Daboll? And I'm sure he's aware of that. So I think that's going to be the part of the conversation that we should bring up. He's not going to demand Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen money unless the Giants go on a Super Bowl run and win it.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's kind of what happened with Goff, right? I mean, he went on a Super Bowl run. I think they won or lost that Super Bowl. I think they lost that Super Bowl, right, to the Patriots.
Yeah, Jared Goff doesn't have a ring. Yeah.
Right. They lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots. I don't know why I thought that. And that's when he got his massive contract. So if they don't go on a Super Bowl in the Giants, they just make the playoffs, maybe lose first round, win a game, something like that. That's when maybe you get to the point where you can find some kind of happy medium with the Daniel Jones type. It's hard to say, but I do think that what Nick said is right. Teams are going to look at this whole body of work with Jones. They're not just going to be like, oh my God, look at this 2022 season where he had 5, where he's doing what he's doing out there. They're going to be like, the whole body of work says there's an injury history here we have to think about. There were 3 years of bad play and then a breakout. Do I want to invest $35 million a year in this guy, or $30 million a year in this guy, or $25 million with a ton of guaranteed? And if that's no, the Giants have a lot of leverage. And this is not the Dave Gettleman era anymore. In the Dave Gettleman era, the Giants bid against themselves for a Kenny Golladay contract. They honored a Kyle Rudolph deal that made no sense once they learned of the Liz Frank injury. They re-signed a 30-year-old Logan Ryan with a ton of dead cap and pushed back a ton of dead cap because he was a quote-unquote leader. And so this is a new regime. They're not going to bid against themselves. So if the market doesn't dictate that Daniel Jones should get $25-30 million a year, even if he does lead them to the playoffs or win a game in the playoffs, then I don't think the Giants will do that. I don't think they'll pay that. So there might be a happy medium. As far as your question goes, though, like Jake, like the long-term prospect of it, it's tough. I mean, look, some would argue the Giants never had an elite quarterback and they won 2 Super Bowls. People have said that with Eli Manning. Now, as far as Eli Manning goes, his best and biggest moments came in the playoffs, and he did play like an elite quarterback during the playoffs, specifically the 2011 run. So that's the difference. If Daniel Jones elevates his game to that elite level during the playoffs, like the 2011 Eli Manning version, then you could re-sign him and think, okay, well, maybe it doesn't matter. I don't need to worry about saving money. I don't need the elite quarterback because I have somebody who plays his best in those key spots. And so that's something obviously Nick and I will be looking for if the Giants do make the playoffs.
And we're seeing a little bit of seeds of Daniel Jones
for sure
in terms of the toughness and the respect that he has around this locker room. Like we saw it against Dallas. That's a loss right there. The only loss in the season for the Giants. But you saw how tough Daniel Jones was there. Let's look back at the 2011 NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. What did Eli Manning show? Just incredible toughness. Now, you look at Daniel Jones, you look at Eli Manning, those two aren't necessarily comparable. Like Daniel Jones only has thrown for over 200 yards once this season so far with 5 wins under his belt, but he's still making the plays when he's being asked to. Right. So I think the conversation around paying him at the end of this season is going to be a lot more nuanced because, like we said, the market and all the other stuff that we've been talking about over the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Peter F. asks, Azeez Ojulari really grew from a physical standpoint between years 1 and 2. What kind of growth do you think we'll see from Kayvon Thibodeau next offseason?
It's interesting. So Azeez Ojulari needed to grow because he was kind of getting flattened as a run defender. He was losing his containment quite a bit as an edge rusher, and that was an issue last year for him. It's not really happening with Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't see Kayvon Thibodeau as someone who is struggling to hold up at the point of attack. So I don't really know if I want him to get more jacked and add more muscle and possibly compromise the burst and the explosiveness, which are, in my opinion, some of his key traits.
It's interesting because, I mean, I think I wouldn't say I want him to get like all jacked up or whatever, or add a ton of weight to his body type, Nick, or to his frame. But like, have you seen the picture of him? Like, I think in week 1 or he wasn't playing week 1 or 2. One of the first weeks where he had like that mink thing on, that mink like half like vest.
Oh yes, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking. That was a weird look, man.
It was whatever. His style. I don't care about that. But I think when you look at that body type, you think like there is definitely room for growth. Like, it's not like he's completely 6-pack there, rocked up there, like from the abdomen up. So I still think he can really cut down and tone and get like more cut as a player. I wouldn't want him to put on more weight though from that standpoint. So I still think there is room to kind of, and look, he was in a college system at Oregon, studying, going to school, doing other things. Now this is his job. And so I do think with time, especially with off-season training, when it's not like you have to prepare for the draft, go through the draft process on all that, he can really form his body to where he wants it to be. And I don't think it's a complete, I don't think his frame is as completed as he wants it to be as it stands. So I still think there is room for that.
I agree with that. Yeah. In terms of trimming up a little bit, definitely. I was thinking about it in terms of Azeez Ojulari, who added like 15 pounds of muscle and looked like the Hulk. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want that, I don't think, from Thibodeau. I think you're right on that.
Frank the Tank asks, hey guys, the Giants are predicted underdogs in their game against the Jags and expected to be against the Seahawks. Granted, away games. I get it. Thoughts on when this team will get some national respect? What will be the turning point if there is one? And if I could jump in here, Dan, and give just my initial impression of why they are underdogs. I saw ESPN had the Giants at like 26% to win. I think that is absolutely ridiculous against a team that is 2-4. But I think Vegas is looking at this, and this is the first game of a road trip where after this game, they have to fly from freaking Florida back to New Jersey and then all the way to the Pacific Northwest to play Seattle. That's not just 2 road games. That is a lot of travel. That is some of the worst traveling you will have to do in the NFL, traveling from Florida all the way to the Pacific Northwest. And that coupled with the fact the Giants have only had one true road game, which was week 1 when they had a ton of preparation against Tennessee. I think that's one reason why we're seeing them not get the respect that they possibly deserve. Now, at the same time, a lot of these wins, I'm not saying they're fluky, but they're all very close. They're all very down to the wire. And I think the home field advantage has helped the New York Giants. Now, you can't say that with Green Bay. It definitely helped them against Baltimore. And then Chicago and Carolina, those teams, the Giants, I think we could say should beat, but at the time we didn't necessarily think that. So I think one reason why Vegas is baking this in is because of the distance of travel with the next 2 games with the Jags and then the Seahawks.
Yeah, that's fair. And I don't think this is necessarily like national respect issue, Frank, because this is not like the national media doesn't create the spreads. Vegas is creating these spreads based on where they think the money is going to go. So just a quick primer, Vegas does not predict the final score of the game when they create a spread. They predict where the money will come in, and their objective is to get the money to come in completely even. They win if 50% of the bets are on one team, 50% is on the other, because then they just win with the juice and with the vig. So why would they think about favoring the Jacksonville Jaguars at home? Well, there are some, like Nick said, the Giants have had close margin victories the entire season, right? No road games besides the week 1 game against the Titans and the London game. And Could it be a game they overlook? Are they a type of team that overlooks games? That happens in the NFL. I don't want to say the Giants are going to be that team this well coached. I personally don't think they will be. But from Vegas' standpoint, they certainly could be. So I think a lot of those factors played into this. As far as when will be the turning point for them getting national respect, I'd say if they can go into their bye week and not lose a single game before that, so go into the bye week, what would that be, 7-1? I think it's this game and the next and the Detroit game. So if they can go to the bye week at 7-1, I think that's when you start to get the national recognition.
And I also want to say the Jacksonville Jags, for all their faults and their inexperience, I think they have like 27 explosive plays of more than 20 yards already this season. They rank like 4th in the league in that metric. And the Giants just gave up so many explosive plays to freaking Kenyon Drake. And a lot of them were in the rushing attack. But you look at how Jacksonville uses their running backs, and it's not even just James Robinson or ETN. I mean, last week they used Jermichael Hasty, who ended up scoring a long touchdown. I believe that was out of the backfield as a receiver. But, man, they have a unique rushing attack. I shared a clip on Twitter of them incorporating a boundary run, I believe it was, with a trap and a wham block that totally cleared out that side of the line of scrimmage. And then it was just the safety who took a bad angle on ETN. The Giants need to really shore up their lateral rushing defense, which I think they can. And that's what we said against Dallas. I think there were specific reasons, as we detailed on the All-22 defense, as to why they struggled against the Baltimore Ravens. But I think the fact that Jacksonville's offense has created a lot of explosive plays, and the Giants defense has allowed, at least recently, a solid amount, is another thing that Vegas could be looking at as a reason to why the Jacksonville Jags may have a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I saw that clip too. I think it was either Brandon Thorne or somebody else who was like, Doug Peterson has done a great job coaching because he's taken these running backs with vision issues like an ETN and put him in spots where he doesn't even have to make a vision. He doesn't have to use his vision. He can just get right into space like you saw on that run, that wham trap run. So we'll see what happens there. We know the Giants have struggled with schemed runs to the outside this season. They struggled against the Ravens with that. They struggled against the Cowboys with that. You can try to take it away with coaching, but ultimately, like we showed in a lot of these spots, it comes down to the linebackers helping each other out. Okay, Jalen Smith and Tay Crowder. One of the two is going to be blocked, and one of the other two has to make a play and help out his brother there. So far this season, we haven't seen a lot. We saw one really good game out of Tay Crowder, and then one big hit against the Titans that got him a lot of fanfare. But ultimately, not besides that, not too many examples of him, in my opinion, making those kinds of plays. So we'll see if he can have a good game this week, or maybe if they kind of phase him out because he wasn't playing as much last week in some spots that were unexpected. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes, but that's definitely going to be a way that the teams are going to attack the Giants moving forward.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, Dan, because the linebacker play is one primary reason that I feel like Wink Martindale's putting a lot of stress on those second level defenders to scrape over the top and get outside and fill. Right. And sometimes Tay Crowder is just getting picked off. The slight hesitation that he has really works against him. And I'm actually curious too, if Landon Collins, if he does end up kind of getting dressed and acclimated to this defense, if he will eat into that snap share. I still think Tay Crowder is the linebacker one on this team, even though Jalen Smith, I feel like, is making a really good push for that. But given him a couple weeks, more mistakes, if he's not in position more and more, I think that could change.
Yeah, me too. Okay, let's see. Baba Booey asks, any chance you guys can do a quick bit on what you've seen from Evan Neal in the last 2 weeks? Watching live, it's felt like he started to be more comfortable. I haven't noticed anything brutal like I did from him the first weeks before that.
Yeah, we brought it up on the All-22 offensive show this week where there was more of a traditional passing game. I felt like he looked very comfortable, very smooth. He was taking vertical sets, patient with his hands, was playing much more balanced, his feet underneath him, not leaning at his chest over his toes all that often. So I feel like from a technique standpoint, he seemed a lot more comfortable. Need to see more consistency with that. In terms of the week prior against the Packers, it was still an offense where they didn't necessarily take too many drop back sets to where he would have been exposed in pass protection, but definitely encouraging this past week against Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I think just from my vantage point, more issues in the run game in these last 2 weeks than even the pass game, which you wouldn't expect. And not issues, just some examples of him off balance in the run game. In the pass game, asked to do a lot more, like Nick said, 12 vertical sets versus the 5, or 12 traditional pass sets versus the 5 from the week before, and was arguably even better. So I think there is a potential for him trending up, but we won't really know until, like we've said earlier, the Giants are forced to get out of their shell and go into more of like a traditional, we're down 2 scores. There's 9 minutes left. We got to pass the ball. That's when we'll really get to see if that progress can hold up.
And we haven't even really seen this offense. Even like this offense has several come from behind victory. This is kind of crazy to think about. I don't think we've really brought this up. Daniel Jones has like what, 3 come from behind victories, like true come from behind victories, down by like 10 points.
I think it's 4
And the Giants
total.
If you include Carolina, right?
Yeah, if you include Carolina, if you include Tennessee, where it was just like run, boot.
But that's my
I guess
point.
you can kind of include that.
They haven't abandoned the rushing attack.
Right.
Even last week, they didn't abandon the rushing
Yep.
attack against the Baltimore Ravens. And luckily, the defense kind of, I don't want to say bailed them out in that area, but the defense really stepped up to give the Giants offense more opportunity to limit the score and then eventually take the score away from the Baltimore Ravens, the lead that is. So,
and I don't know how much of that is because they don't trust their passing game and they don't trust like the traditional passing game to kind of like screw things up, or because they're just, because I always feel like in these spots, Nick, like teams too often bail from their game plan, and when they fall behind a couple scores and like, all right, we got to just go to the pass. And I don't think the Giants are that kind of team, but I wonder if that's mostly because they don't trust their ability to do that and they're like, this is our only chance, or because they just really feel confident in we don't need to rush through this thing. We have enough time to make a comeback here.
I think it's more so, if there is one reason, I'm sure there are several reasons. I think it's more so just because they work the play action rollout, the play action boot, and just the play action game so well. And it's also Saquon Barkley in these situations where they're trying to stop him. He's ripping off 4, 5, sometimes 12-yard runs. So it's working still. It's not like he's getting stopped at the line of scrimmage. And then like we've said several times, the way this offensive coaching staff marries their rushing attack and their passing attack really puts the defense in a bind. And that's why we see so many of these crossing routes work. That's why we see so much of that play action boot and just the play action game in general work, is because the defense thinks they are actually running the football. It's not just like, oh yeah, we're running the play action, even though no one's selling it. The Giants are selling it very well. So I think that's another reason why.
It's a great point.
House of Shane asks, if you could only upgrade one or the other this offseason, would you rather upgrade cornerback or wide receiver?
It's tough. So like, we'll just assume this doesn't mean pick a guy a certain point in the draft. You just get a clear upgrade, right? So one position needs to be upgraded over the other. I think for me, it would be wide receiver, Nick, just because I feel like an upgrade for me means you're going to get a lot of speed on the field. You're going to get a player who's better than anyone they currently have on their roster. So corner, at least I know I have Adoree Jackson. Receiver, maybe Wan'Dale breaks out the rest of the season. Tony, who knows at this point, not much behind that I feel like has any breakout potential. So clear upgrade wise, I think the Giants are better off with a receiver upgrade.
I think we got this question a couple mailbags ago, and I went with cornerback, and I think I'm going to stay with cornerback. And let's go over, like, if you could have like a Devonta Smith right now, who's a great wide receiver, or a Patrick Surtain right now. And I think the Giants are playing themselves out of even like the 10th pick at this point, but let's just say that theoretically, who would you go with? And I would go with Surtain, but Surtain
there too. Yeah.
But he's elevated his game to such a level to where I don't even think those two guys are comparable, even though I love Devonta Smith.
Exactly.
He's truly like the number one cornerback, I think, in the league right now, Patrick. Like, he's up there.
Yeah, he's definitely up there right now this season. And that's only year 2 for him.
It's crazy. And I'm proud of the kid because we liked him a lot on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
But Rowan asks, #Big Blue Banter, thank you. What contract are you giving Daniel Jones if the rest of the season replicates what we has gotten through the first 6 games? Assume we have a low mid-20s first-round pick. I think $50 million over 2 years, with the Giants being able to move on in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're getting to that point, Rowan, where we can't do what we originally thought we might be able to do, like a 2-year 30, a 2-year 35. We've probably moved already into that range of a 2-year 50. But again, like, and I like the idea of you have that out in year 2 if it doesn't work out, like if he doesn't make enough progress. But I feel like, again, I don't know what the market is for Jones. So I think Jones has played the best football of his career in weeks 5 and 6, the 2 best games of his career, the best 2-game stretch. We're starting to see some really good things as far as what they're asking him to do, what he's operating, and him not turning the ball over. Now, the question is, are people around the NFL or the other 31 teams watching this and being like, I need to give Daniel Jones a $30 million a year contract? Because if they're not, and I'm not sure they are, then you're bidding against yourself here. Because I don't know, can the Giants play hardball with Daniel Jones? I don't see why not right now. I mean, I just don't know. It's so hard to tell, Rohan, what what the market actually is for Jones. Should the Giants let him hit it and then come back to them and be like, okay, this is what I'm getting from other teams. This is my, because if a team's going to make an investment in Daniel Jones this offseason, year 5 of his career for Jones, they're essentially saying, okay, first of all, it's going to be a team that needs a quarterback, right? And a team that doesn't have a quarterback signed under contract. So we could narrow down a lot of teams just through that. Then it's got to be a team that doesn't want to go the route of spending a first-round pick on a quarterback where they get the 4 or 5 year. You get the 5-year rookie contract scale with the rookie option potential. So now you're asking a team to say, not only do I think Daniel Jones is better than the quarterback I could get early in this draft class, but I think he's $20 million a year better than that quarterback against my cap. So that narrows down a lot of teams as well. So then you look at the teams that are like competitive this year and have a retiring quarterback, or competitive this year, but just don't have the good quarterback play to get them over the top. And again, like maybe that's like a Tampa Bay Bucks. That could be like if Brady retires, that could maybe be a team that would want to like outbid you for Daniel Jones. But it feels very narrow to me. It feels very unlikely to me that there's going to be this huge market for him. So I really think that they got to be careful with this thing because they're still trying to build a roster around him. But the good news is, at least in my mind, they're getting very cap healthy. So even if they do, quote unquote, pay a little more than what the market would dictate for Jones, they're going to be able to kind of recover from that, especially if you outline it, like you said, it's only a 2-year deal rather than like a long-term deal.
Astute analysis, Dan. I agree with everything that you said. And I don't know if Daniel Jones has the cachet to, if it's a reasonable deal for him to really like hold out. Like his best option right now is to play in this system that is easily maximizing his skill set. And he might also be looking at this like, look, teams don't trust me around the league after the 4 previous years or 3 previous years in Jason Garrett's system and with Pat Shurmur. So let me go back with the Giants and have another good season if he maintains this level of play. And then he can look for a contract because he's still a relatively young player.
Sure. That's another good point. He might want to build his resume for the rest of the league as well. But I think ultimately he wants to be a Giant, and it's just a matter of, will the Giants want him back? And as it's trending right now, it seems like they will.
Which is great, man, because we didn't exactly expect that going into this season. But we have a question here from Ramblin' asks, how come against Baltimore the Giants ran so often both on first and second down, even after having little success? I understand setting up the play action or pass, but it caused too many punts. Do they still not trust the pass pro enough? Curious strategy. Anything on tape to explain it?
Well, first of all, Nick, it's Ramble On. I thought you might know that one. It's a Led Zeppelin. Do you like Led Zeppelin, right?
Not really. I mean, like I don't really know much about them. I've listened. Is that the band that sings Black Dog?
Yes. You have to ask a question about who oh my God. I can't believe you're even
going. Little insight with me. All those bands from prior to my birth that are like of similar genre, I kind of blend them all in, like the Pearl Jams and the Led Zeppelins, and they might not even be that close, and I could get like chastised like crazy for this, but I kind of blend them all into like the same bucket, and I'm just like, yeah, if they're on, I'll listen to them, but I'm never like going to YouTube being like, yo, I gotta listen to this song.
I like how you blended in Pearl Jam and Led Zeppelin, 2 bands from completely different eras and different genres of music, so it's great.
Just telling you that, yeah.
I'm not a Pearl Jam fan. No offense to anyone out there. I don't understand the Eddie Vedder. Does he walk up to people in real life, Eddie Vedder, and be like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, it's very nice to meet you. Yeah." Like, is that the most exaggerated voice I've ever heard in rock? So and people say that about Led Zeppelin, but at least it's not like that. But anyway, that's my Eddie Vedder. Not great.
It's an even flow. That's
yeah, that's Eddie Vedder. And then you could listen to Jeremy where he just has like a freak out at the end of that song. Like you know what I'm talking about if you've heard Jeremy. Just play it through and then wait till the end where he just starts like making noises. That's kind of the Eddie Vedder tune. He just makes noises.
I don't think I know that song. Was it Jeremy? Did you say?
Yeah, Jeremy spoken.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've heard that song.
Girl.
I definitely have heard that song. Like, I've heard this rant before.
And now we're just doing Eddie Vedder impressions on the Big Blue Panther podcast. We've gone fully off the rails here. But to answer your question, Ramble On, let's get it back on track. I'll say this. It's their game plan, man. Like they want to stick with the run for a lot of reasons. They want to stick with the run to protect the pass game, like you said right now, the pass protection. And I don't think it's necessarily a Daniel Jones thing or a receiver thing. I think mostly for them, it's a offensive line thing. They don't feel that great about the interior protection right now if they're asked to do it over and over and over again. But also, they want to get the ball in the hand of their best player, and they're by far and away playmaker on this offense, and that's Saquon Barkley. So you can try to get him involved in the pass game, but it's not as easy as it looks. The run game is tried and true way to get him involved, and he has proven at times that he can take you back in a game like he did against the Titans, running the ball almost every down of that comeback drive, or he can break a big one like he's done in other games. So they want to get the ball in Barkley's hands, and they want to be consistent with it, and they don't want to say, well, it's not working here, it's not working on this drive, let's stop doing it, because that's something Barkley said after the game. He's like, I give the coaches credit for sticking with the run, because they know, and it didn't happen in this last game, whatever, it didn't happen against the Ravens, but they know that at some point he can break a big play.
And he does too.
Yes.
And another reason why, like they typically use the rushing attack early in the game to feel out the defense a little bit, and they don't have too much success on those first two drives, or at least they haven't throughout the game so far. But on a couple of the drives in the second quarter and then into the third quarter, some of those were RPOs where Daniel Jones just decided to hand the football off because he was reading a defender. So there were there were pass tags within the play. It's just Jones decided to hand the football off, and it didn't necessarily end up working out. So I think that's another thing we also have to kind of monitor. And then there was one drive too where they attempted to come out a little bit more pass heavy, and then Daniel Jones ends up getting sacked. So there's that element of it as well.
Yep. Okay. Michael Benoit asks, I see 4 needs next year's draft: wide receiver, corner, inside linebacker, center. Which is the deepest, and in what order would you prioritize them at the moment?
I don't have which is the deepest right now. We don't start our in-depth draft coverage until around December. So circle back with us there, Michael Benoit. But in terms of prioritizing, I think, this is interesting, man. Cornerback and wide receiver, some would say, are like the most important, but you can also look at the inside linebacker position and be like, yo, this team needs an upgrade at inside linebacker. So I kind of want to give that position, which is typically devalued around the NFL with some teams like the Eagles and teams like that, I want to give that position a little bit more maybe credence. And then center, we've talked pretty extensively about how we want that upgrade at center. We want that Creed Humphrey to anchor this offensive line. So if I had to choose, Dan, I really want another cornerback opposite of Adoree Jackson. Is Aaron Robinson that guy? I'm still not ruling him out. He's just injured at this point. So does the cornerback kind of take a step back from that? And would you elevate the inside linebacker and center over that? Like, I don't really know if I would. So I might go cornerback, wide receiver, inside linebacker, center, but it really just comes down to the prospects. All these prospects are obviously, they're not the same people and they don't have the same types of skill sets. So I just really want the best players here. And that's probably the way that every team should look at it.
Yeah, it's always about best player available for me too, within context, right? Like I don't want to be jamming positions that aren't that. I mean, there's context behind it all. You don't want to be jamming positions of not need, or not of not need, of not important, of less importance, I should say. So you don't want to be jamming IDLs, you don't want to be jamming running backs. But for example, if they saw a quarterback who they felt had elite tools that they could groom, I wouldn't care if they drafted that. Personally, even if they do re-sign Daniel Jones, that's their prerogative. This is a new staff, and they got to make their decision on that. But as far as these 4 positions go, I'd actually go center first. I think this team can benefit most from an upgrade at center over all these positions: wide receiver, corner, inside backer.
So let's look at Tyler Linderbaum. We just saw him, right? And we saw how he did against Dexter Lawrence, struggled a little bit in pass protection, but watching him maneuver in space, a player like that on this team that does run some creative power gap type of concepts. We've seen Mike Kafka call a ton of center pulls around the play side guard. I look at a player like Tyler Linderbaum and I'm like, dude, that kid probably would have fit in very well here in New York.
Yeah, 100%.
So even like guys who are a little bit more undersized, but fleet of foot, like the kid the Eagles drafted out of Nebraska. And speaking of, just to bring up the Eagles in general, you brought up the quarterback and how you wouldn't be upset. That's exactly what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts. And look at them now. They had a guy in place, Carson Wentz, who they might not have been fully sold on, but they draft Jalen Hurts with a top 50 pick. He was a 2nd-round pick. They bring him in, and a couple years later, the Eagles are rolling undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, and you could look to the Eagles for a lot of things that they've done well as a franchise. Giants Talk 3 asks, quick thoughts on trading for either a Mike Gesicki or Tremaine Edmonds. Edmonds is on the Bills, right?
Yes.
Now that you could rule that one out immediately. The Bills are not going to be trading any players while they're going for a Super Bowl. Gesicki's a maybe if the Dolphins fall out of it. If not, then who have been rumored on the block, or who would you guys be trading for?
you have the Panthers guys right now, but DJ Moore has that pretty exorbitant contract. I would like to have Jeremy Chin here, even though the Giants have a lot of talent at the safety position. I still think he would fit in well, but I don't think the Giants should be trading necessarily some of the assets that I think Jeremy Chin would require. I think there's probably a really good market for players like Brian Burns and Jeremy Chin, but the Carolina Panthers, who are in total implosion mode right now, that's the team that you would probably want to look at to see if you can get talented players from them, talented young players who are on rookie deals. I don't necessarily have many other people though, Dan, in mind that I'm like, oh, the Giants right now, the way they are, who are still, I don't want to say a rebuilding team because they're 5-1, but this is the first year of a regime, and they are very particular on how they're going to build. I don't think they're going to expense their future to
Right.
go and acquire someone like a DJ Moore. So I'm not necessarily looking at the situation like, oh, the Giants need to go out and get this guy. Even a guy like Mike Gesicki, I don't know what he would command, but I kind of like Daniel Bellinger and how Daniel Bellinger is playing right now. And I don't want Mike Gesicki in here to be a big slot essentially because he can't block at all. You need to be able to block in this system. And that's why you have guys like Chris Myrick, who made the team, and Daniel Bellinger, who's earning playing time. Tanner Hudson, he's an okay blocker. He's not really great. He's the worst of the three, but he can hold up at least. Whereas Mike Gesicki is essentially just a wide receiver.
Yeah, I can't see any value of trading for a Mike Gesicki. They need their tight ends to block within this style of offense, and he's not going to be able to do that. I don't even really see him like making some kind of immediate impact. They don't really use any kind of big slot within this offense either. So rule him out completely for me. The Chiefs won't trade. I mean, the Bills won't trade Edmonds, so you can rule him out. My thing here is this. Look, I don't really feel like the Giants are in a position to trade draft picks right now with a new regime, especially seeing as how well these early rookies have acclimated to the new system. You see Dane Belton playing a lot of snaps, doing a good job with it. You see Daniel Bellinger doing a good job with his snaps, doing an amazing job, I should say, with his snaps. And those are both day three guys. And they had some injuries that knocked out a couple other day three guys that we thought might be able to make an impact on this team, specifically Darian Beavers. So I don't see them wanting to trade draft picks. It's a mat now where it gets interesting, and we'll talk about this a little later with a question I already peeked at, is could the Giants do a fresh start kind of trade, right? So now you have, here's Kadarius Toney. We can dangle him. We don't have to give up any draft picks. We just took him in the first round. All he needs is a fresh start. What will you give us for Kadarius Toney? All he needs is a fresh start. That's when it starts to get interesting. And that's when you start to look at players who also need a fresh start from the current team they're on. And so that's the type of trade that I might be interested in, a fresh start type of trade. And we'll get to, there's one interesting one later that we'll get to that I have my eye on.
And I do think that's interesting. And I think another thing that's really important to this team is not going to just go out and trade for talented players. Like, they have to be the person that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen want in this building. I do think that's important. We've heard that in previous regimes. I really think that this regime is adhering to that. And I think there are specific players that they want. And it really, I know it's a mantra and it's kind of overused, but I think they have to be tough, smart, and dependable. I think those are three characteristics that Joe Schoen wants in every player that's going to be on this roster.
Yep. Okay. Giant News 56 asks, what was the last Halloween costume each of you guys wore?
Oh, geez. Okay. The last Halloween costume I wore, I think I went like maybe 2 or 3 years ago before the pandemic as the spirit of Halloween. And it was just me dressed like an absolute maniac with like face paint and just like fishnet stockings up my arms and stuff like that. And yeah, I think that's what I was. It was just something I came up with. I like originality. So, but this year I think I'm just doing whatever my girlfriend wants. I'm at that stage of the relationship now.
Well, this might come as a shock to no one who listens to this podcast, but I'm not a big fan of dressing up for Halloween. I used to do it when I was in college, but I can't remember the last time I did it after college. There was a couple parties early. I did like, 1 year with my buddy early in like the Breaking Bad days, I did like a Walter White Jesse type of situation with the hazmat suits on, those blue hazmat suits. I think that was the last one I remember doing. So that's probably the last one. If I do one, it'll be like a topical thing like that. Like I'll do like a TV show character type of deal.
Would you be Tony Soprano?
Not quite big enough to be a Tony Soprano and have that make any sense.
I don't know. You don't always have to look like the costume that you want to be.
If I was going to do Sopranos, I'd be Hesh.
Hesh, underrated character right there.
Yeah.
I wonder why you chose him, Dan.
Yeah, I'd be Hesh. He also says, is there a surprise player returning from injury who will make an impact over the rest of the season? This is a great question.
This is a great question. And the two guys who have been, I think, associated most with this question would probably be Nick Gates and Shane Lemieux, right?
Mhm.
And I'm trying to think of other guys who would constitute, like, is Aaron Robinson going to be back after his 4 games are up? I think realistically, hopefully, that would be good. I don't know how serious that knee injury is. That was a really
It also has
dirty
to be
broken hit.
surprise.
A surprise, yeah. I mean, the surprise one would be Nick Gates, right? That's the biggest
Right.
one, I would say. But I even think you can group Shane Lemieux into that. Remember when Shane Lemieux got hurt? We're like, oh, how serious is it? You're going to be ready for week 1? And we literally just haven't heard anything about this guy since.
Right.
But if I had to pick one surprise, it would be Nick Gates, who I think was out there taking snaps at least. Now, I don't think he's ready to play quite yet, but it's just cool to see him back on the football field.
Yeah, he was taking center snaps today with Feliciano, like getting a breather, like kind of just limited. So that's definitely great to see from Nick Gates. Nick Gates is the pick for sure here. But you could, I mean, there are a lot of options here for the Giants. You could talk about Lemieux potentially shoring up that left guard spot.
Ellerson Smith.
Ellerson Smith is a great call by you. That would be a nice surprise, little pass rush juice on different downs. And then obviously the big one here, which is not much of a surprise, but will really help if it happens, Kadarius Toney. That's the one. Like they said today they didn't really even think about putting him. Dable said today on IR, which means they feel like he's closer than the 4 weeks. I still don't think he'll play before the bye week coming in 2 weeks. So that's 2 more games I think he'll be out. Maybe. It's just so hard to predict on the Toney front. It's all guesswork. But that's the big one.
The Toney one is frustrating just because you're right. It is all guesswork. When you think you're getting close, something else happens. And I feel bad for the kid. Just want to get him out there because I know how valuable he could be to this offense. But in terms of Ellerson Smith, man, look at how Wink Martindale has used the skill set of O'Shane Jimenez. Right. And now think what he could do in the same role. Ellerson Smith, that is, in that role, who has just a little bit more juice than O'Shane. Probably isn't as strong at the point of attack, or at least he wasn't in the past. Maybe he's developed in that area. I'm not sure. But I really think you can do a lot of creative things with the athletic ability of somebody like Ellerson Smith, and I'm looking forward to his return.
Yep.
We have Kurt. Our friend Kurt asks, fellas, after breaking down defensive performance against the Ravens, are you guys more or less optimistic about the Giants' chances against the Eagles? Their rushing attack, plus legit studs at wide receiver, scares me, and I hate the Eagles, he says. Well, I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast hate the freaking Eagles, but I got to say this, Dan, I'm a little scared of the Eagles' rushing attack.
Yeah, their rushing attack is going to be giving them the Giants massive problems. You know, they've been beat earlier this season on deep overs as well. That's going to be a massive issue with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown at wide receiver. This is a terrible matchup for the Giants on the defensive side of the ball. It's where you can finally see that, week after week after week, the Giants have this coaching edge. It's kind of made up for some of the lack of talent. Well, that might not be the case against a team as talented on offensive side of the ball as the Eagles currently are. I mean, we're talking about elite offensive line, arguably the best in the NFL, probably the best in the NFL, the best tackle duo by far with Lane Johnson and Mailata. Now you have maybe the best wide receiver combo in the NFL, in my opinion, in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. A few others can compete for that right, but I think it's those
Chase
two.
And Higgins. Yeah,
Chase and Higgins can compete for that right. I think right now, though, with Higgins hurt, you could probably say it's those two. You also have Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends, in my opinion, in the NFL. I really do feel that way watching him play. He's just freakishly athletic. And then Jalen Hurts, who's playing well, too. It's a really bad matchup. I think in that game, in those 2 games, Giants are going to have to probably open it up a little bit on offense to take a few more chances.
I'm so curious to see how Wink Martindale plays Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Look at what has hurt this defense so far this season. Lateral runs. The Eagles can easily accomplish that just with their offensive line. Not to mention that offense. Yeah. You can have 5-man protections to account for 5 guys coming on blitz because the offensive line is so good, albeit they'll keep like an H-back in and they'll keep Miles Sanders or Boston Scott or Kenny Gainwell into protection just to help shore up the blitz protection. But at the same time, man, the deep overs have killed the Giants in a few different matchups. You brought up Devonta Smith. You brought up A.J. Brown. And then you have the tight end. Like, look what Mark Andrews just did to the New York Giants. Dallas Goedert is fully capable of doing that. So I'm a little scared, but hopefully we'll see the defense shore up a little bit in the coming weeks. And by the time these 2 teams play each other, we can be a little bit more confident.
Yep. Okay, TJ Gagliardi asks, bonus question, Nick, give me your top 3 comedians of all time. Dan, give me your top 3 bands.
Top 3 comedians of all time. Okay, Bill Burr is going to be on that list.
Okay,
I'm really starting to get more. I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's so hard for me to actually say. I think Mark Norman would be squeaking in there. At least that's the phase that I'm in right now. Big Mark Norman fan, even though he's a younger comedian. And then I think if I had to choose a third, I'm gonna go with, I think Tom Segura could be in there. There's a lot though. Like I don't like the whole top 3 because I have particular, like I could go with any single one of like my top 15. I have so much reverence and respect for a lot of those guys. But let's go with those 3 right now. Ask me tomorrow, I'd probably pick a different third one.
And I really like Mark Norman too. I've discovered him recently, started following him on Instagram. One thing I love about him, he follows the same Curb Your Enthusiasm clips account that I follow on Instagram, and he literally likes every single one of those videos. I can tell he enjoys Curb just as much as I do. But anyway, my top 3 bands.
Sorry, man. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Go for it.
There's just so many other guys that are flowing through my head right. It's like Chappelle, Louis, freaking Mitch Hedberg. You know, it could be any of them.
Yeah, you can go. Bands is tough. I'll go with, at start, my all-time favorite band. Shout out Ron Schneier, who had a fun little discovery with this band. My dad played them for me when I was a kid throughout my whole life. But as a kid, I went through a phase of just liking 2 things, like emo, screamo / pop punk type phase, whatever that is, like Under Oath, The Used, those types of bands when I was a teenager. And then I loved rap, Eminem, Big L, just to name a few, early Jay-Z, early Nas. But as I got older, I came to appreciate the actual amazing music, and that is the Allman Brothers, my favorite band of all time. Now, there are multiple eras of the Allman Brothers. The best era for me is pre-Dwayne's death. The Live at the Fillmore East album I've listened to over 1,000 times on repeat. Just listening to Dwayne and Dickie Betts trade off licks there with the guitar. It's just some of the most phenomenal guitar play you can possibly hear. I think it literally is the best guitar play ever on a live album. That's Live at the Fillmore East. After Dwayne's death, they changed a little bit of their sound. They still had some bangers, though, some absolute bangers with Dickie leading the way. So Allman Brothers 1. Number 2 for me is My Morning Jacket. Shout out to My Morning Jacket. They're a living band. I've now seen them twice live. I really need to up that. Once was at Red Rocks. Very similar type style to the Allman Brothers, jammy in a lot of ways, a little bit, but they really mix it up. So they would be number 2 for me. Number 3, I'd probably have to go with Led Zeppelin, number 3, just because they're freaking phenomenal. There are a lot of bands, like I said, Nick, that compete for them. And I do want to give a shout out to, like, I'll say this. I'm going to expand the question real quick, TJ. I'm going to say favorite rapper of all time, Big L, by far. I think he's the greatest rapper bar for bar of all time. Best punchlines, best flow. It's too bad he was killed too early. So Big L will be best rapper of all time from that genre. So I'll give you my favorite bands and my favorite rapper, and then we'll move it forward.
No Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Chili Peppers are up there too, Nick. See, this is why it's tough. Like, I want to throw in Chili Peppers, Arctic Monkeys, plenty of bands. Like Stadium Arcadium, Chili Peppers, one of the best double albums of all time, if not
It's
best.
such a good album. I mean, I could talk Red Hot Chili. Like, I'm not a big music guy, but Red Hot Chili Peppers is one of my favorite bands. Like, John Frusciante is my favorite musician of all time. Like, I listen to his solo stuff, and it's weird, and it's odd, and it's out there, but it's just essentially like poetry with music. And he can't sing. He kind of sounds like a dying cat, but I absolutely love John Frusciante. I went through like a 5-year phase of like, that was the only things I listened to. And then I transitioned to just listening to the Bo Burnham, who was a comedian, a musical comedian. So I have a really weird music taste, but I absolutely love Frusciante. And I got to say, man, Stadium Arcadium was great, but I don't know, like, if you had to pick your favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album that's not Stadium Arcadium, what is it? Because like, I'm up there with By the Way and like you can, like, I can bounce so many.
I think Californication would be my number 2.
I like the newer stuff too. The newer stuff is good. Obviously, it's not the classics, but the newer
not
stuff.
Loving the newer stuff as much. It's still good. I'm just not loving it as much. I want to hear their new album coming out though.
Yeah, I have not listened to that either. David Goodman asks a question. He says, Daniel Jones bringing him back on a 2-year deal that they can get out of at 1. That could be, you know, something that the Giants entertain. But do you think they should draft a developmental quarterback? It's kind of similar to the question that Dan already asked. And then he goes on and he says, like Anthony Richardson, with the theory that this is a better team than we thought, and they won't be in the position to draft the top 5 guy. That's if Anthony Richardson comes out, of course.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Anthony Richardson might end up staying, but like I said earlier, if they, I trust the staff fully. If they feel like they can draft a toolsy quarterback who they can groom, kind of like they groomed Josh Allen in the past, I'm fine with them trying to do that.
This is a question that Giants sideline asks. Let's say the Giants extend Dexter Lawrence this offseason. Does that wash out his 5th-year option on his rookie deal, or does the new deal kick in after his 5th-year option?
I don't know this for sure. I'm not the best with contract stuff, but I think it will wash out the 5th-year option, and then they can kind of play it any way they want. They can have a low cap hit for year 1, a regular cap hit, or they could have a front loaded to the earlier in the contract. So it will allow them cap flexibility.
And that's one of the primary reasons, that and just to lock the player up to not
Right.
allow him to go to free agency, obviously, that you do extend players early. Matt DuBois asks, what would you be interested in trading for Jerry Judy?
So this is what I was talking about earlier. If there's a fresh start type trade, because if you look at the metrics this year, Judy is getting open consistently, and he actually has the third lowest catchable target rate in the NFL right now. That's how bad Russell Wilson has been in that entire offense. So if you tell me right now, fresh start trade, Kadarius Toney for Jerry Judy, I might sit here and I might accept that.
Oh, I would definitely accept that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Judy can be frustrating from a drop standpoint, but dating back to his days at Alabama, that he was one of those Alabama route runners like a Mamari
Right.
Cooper, who were just like, he's silly when you watch videos of him cutting on a dime and running routes. He's absolutely crazy in that manner. So I would love to bring him into New York.
Yeah. And that's kind of how the Giants should be thinking about it, dangling Toney instead of the draft picks, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Will asks, who won more in poker, Clarence Royce or the executive game? I'm going to imagine that this question is more tailored to you, Dan.
Yeah, it's a shout out, Will. It's a reference to The Wire. There's like a game with Royce Clarence, who was the mayor at one point in Baltimore, and they thought like he was being bankrolled by like illegal campaign funding. So I guess Will's trying to say, like, did the game win more, or did Clarence Royce win more? Was he actually winning, or was the game winning? I'll go with the game one on that one, and he was doing some nefarious things. But he also asks, on a Giants related note, what were previous coaching staffs doing wrong with O'Shane Ximines besides not rhyming the GM's name with him? And then is this regime and what has this regime been doing right with him?
So in terms of doing wrong, I think a lot of it was just he was injured a lot. That was like his rookie season wasn't that bad, and he was injured the last 2 years. And I do think there were times where they would put his hand in the dirt as like not necessarily a 5 technique, but a little bit off wide, and he would get washed a little bit too often. Some of that is the fact that he was coming from a smaller school and he didn't necessarily have the build to anchor down. But I think what they're doing with him now is they're using him in a variety of different ways and just on the edge in terms of dropping him into coverage and sending him. And I think he has progressed his own game to become stronger at the point of attack in terms of just setting the edge, which we ended up seeing on that Mark Andrews play, that negative 1 yard rush by J.K. Dobbins in the second Ravens drive where they ended up missing a field goal. So just how Wink Martindale is using him, I just think it's in a more creative fashion and a more broad fashion to allow him to use his athletic ability and his ability to operate in space, which isn't something that we necessarily saw too often in Patrick Graham's system.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's a less traditional role, and he's doing a lot better with that. Let's move to Jake Andrews, who says, what would you say that Dexter Lawrence is the JPP of defensive tackles? So for those who don't know, during the Jerry Reese tenure, he drafted a tight end called Adrian Robinson, who then he referred to as the Jason Pierre-Paul tight ends. Robinson never went on to make any impact in the NFL.
Yeah, that was I remember that became a running joke during the Jerry Reese era. And Dexter Lawrence was a first round pick. So I think this is just like a fun question that doesn't really need analysis. He's JPP, a defensive tackle. He's just a stud defensive tackle. We'll go with that.
Yeah, but I do understand what he's saying. Like, this guy is an athletic freak at this point. To be able to move the way he does at 340, it's pretty absurd. So I like it. It's mostly a joke, but I like it. He also asks, what was your best position or functional equivalent when you guys used to play schoolyard football?
For me, it was wide receiver. I was so I played like in adult football leagues and stuff like that, like flag football leagues. And then when I got out of the Marines, I would play in like Facebook leagues where like I didn't know any of the guys, but I would just join like this Facebook group and I would end up showing up to the park and just playing with them. And I made a couple like friends through it and everything like that. It was pretty physical, man. Like I could not do it now. Like I would get destroyed because my knees are just not as good. But I was always a wide receiver, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was pretty fast, and I would always go in. I was usually the last pick in the first day, and then the next game I would always be like the first or second pick. So just pat myself on the back there, but it was a fun time.
I won't pat myself on the back because I am a 5'8" Jew and I'm not very athletic whatsoever. I'm better at sports than I would seem to be, especially basketball and tennis. But as far as football goes, I played a little bit of quarterback. I had pretty decent ball placement, horrific arm talent, and kind of like a Taylor Heineke. I could run around and then kind of put a ball in a spot, but there would be a lot of interceptions. couldn't really throw to any levels of the different levels, deep levels of the field. So Taylor Heineke, a poor man's Taylor Heineke. When I was and early in my life, I loved quarterback. I love football, so I named myself QB Dan. My first screen name on AIM was QB Dan 7. that's my screen name. So the weird thing is, we actually had a phase in my friend group during like the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college, like during when we were home from college, where we would play legit tackle football on a field. It was unbelievable. No pads, no helmets. We just played tackle football. And we would have this rivalry with my best friend of mine, shout out Gary Levine from Livingston, him and his Livingston crew versus us and our West Orange crew. A bunch of unathletic dudes playing tackle football. And there were multiple concussions that went undocumented and determined. One was Gary, my friend, getting slammed to the ground on a sack versus Kevin, and he was just motionless there for a few minutes there, or a few seconds there, I should say. It was not a pretty sight. There were injuries. My friend Jordan broke his foot playing this tackle football game. One of the dumbest ideas ever that we continued on. Tackle football on basically a turf field, I think it was, the high school field, the soccer field, with no pads. But I was never any good, really. I was an okay to bad quarterback, and I think I was in position on defense, so I'll give myself that.
Yeah, the tackle football was. I look back to my early 20s, and I can't believe I did that so often. And I was always with no pads, and I would witness such bad injuries, dude. People tear their ACL, roll their ankle. Yep. We would play with Division III guys in these little pickup football leagues that were started on Facebook, and they would get hurt. And I'm like, why are you play Division III football? Why are you out here playing with a bunch of schmucks that from Facebook? It was kind of wild, but they were so much fun, man. I had a blast. And I'm the kind of guy, Dan, you know me. You've played video games with me and stuff like that, where I don't talk any crap at all. I just go out there. I don't say a freaking word. I'm quiet as a mouse when I'm playing sports, man. But I would love one day to play basketball against you, because I can just imagine you talking crap and being really annoying on defense. I'm imagining in basketball, you're just the most annoying defender to go up against.
No, I'm not. There are annoying defenders. I'm not really one of those annoying defenders. And I don't really talk.
I don't really mean by mouth. I'm talking more of just
about,
effort and just
Oh, no, I'm high effort, but I don't foul. I know a lot of defenders who have the fouling style where they basically use their body and they're just let's pick up. No one's going to call it. I'm not really that, so I don't have that. But I will say this, as far as you saying that you're not a talker when it comes to competition, Nick, I think you are a talker. You're not a crap talker, but you are the person who, if anything remotely unlucky happens to you in a game, you'll let everyone know about it, and you'll call it luck, and you'll say you're only losing because of luck. You'll insinuate you're only losing because of luck, and it's very frustrating to play against someone who's blaming luck the whole time.
But Dan, you're the same exact way. You're the same.
I feel that because of you. I do that because of you. I have to counter your BS whenever. So anyway, we don't need to get into this right now. We can calm it down here. But I just wanted to say you are not some quiet mouse when you're playing video games.
This is I'm not talking about video games. Video games, you're 100% accurate. I'm talking about physical sports where there is no luck. Okay. You can't blame luck when you drop a pass or you're running routes and getting tackled. That's just man on man. But I gotta say, this is the straight Spider-Man meme right now of you and I pointing at each other. We do that same exact stuff to each other.
Well, the next question is one that you can only answer. I will not be capable of answering this one. Rohan asks, I'm almost a vegan. What's your favorite mock meat dish? So Rohan, have never had a mock meat dish in my entire life, so I can't answer this question. Maybe Nick has. I feel like Nick, you've got to had a mock meat dish.
I've definitely had mock meat before, but I don't know any of their names. I'm actually curious on what a mock meat dish is. I'm not a vegan. I love meat. So I've had it from the past. If my girlfriend was hey, all right, yeah, I guess I'll eat it. And then it tastes just like meat. And I'm like, no, it doesn't at all, but whatever, more power to you, do your thing. I usually just put the sauce on it and then it ends up tasting okay. And it did grow on me. When I was in my early 20s, I would eat some crumbled meat. I can't remember exactly what it was, and it was frozen, and then you heat it up. And at first I'm like, oh, this is gross. But then as you eat more of it, it ended up growing on you a little bit, but it's never the real thing. It's not as
crumbled frozen meat. You couldn't possibly sold that worse to me. I would eat crumbled frozen meat.
It is what it is. But Dan, I got to say this, man. This isn't the first time that I've said something would grow on you. Remember, Dan, when I gave you the Casein dessert?
Oh, that is a great point by you. That is a great call by you. That is Nick once gave me a take when I was actually in shape and caring about myself and I was lifting weights. He would say you should try to have a casein shake before you go to sleep, like late at night, to kind of give yourself that extra protein, that it's a slow breaking down protein overnight. People who know have lifted weights know casein. But he would say at first I would eat and I would report back to him and I'd be like, this sucks. I can't believe. And for him, it's like, this is my treat of the day. Like, I'm looking forward to it. I get to make this casein shake. But I will say this, it grew on me completely. I ended up loving it. But the thing is, you have to make sure you do it a certain way. You have to use only a little bit of water. So it's basically like a pudding, like a cakey pudding type thing. Well, not cakey. It's like a pudding. But if you do too much water and it becomes like a watery shake, then it sucks. But if you have the right amount of water, you get really good at you get really good at ultimately when you do this every night at figuring out the right amount of water to use. And then I showed him something too, because I told him one day you can make like a hot chocolate casein type of treat, and it's not bad. That's another way to go about it. So that is true.
And it can ruin your night if you screw the consistency up, because you have to just eat it. You can't just throw it away. That's a lot of money right there.
Yeah. You don't want to throw it away, but the consistency is everything. It needs to be the pudding, not the watery kind. So we've gone off the rails on this mailbag. We're having a lot of fun with it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these ridiculous takes. But we also have one from Lucas Mansour, who asks, seems like every season, regardless of the coaching staff, the Giants are plagued by injuries. Should Joe Schoen consider replacing our training and medical staff, or are we just cursed?
I don't know if it's cursed. I think it's just bad luck. And I think football's a very just physical game. I think a lot of teams go through injuries. It does seem like the Giants have had a lot of injuries. I will say that, but I'm also really close with this team. I'm sure the Chargers fans and other fans would say the same thing. I would never advocate to fire the training staff that's been there in place for quite some time and has tons of respect. So no, I would not go in that direction. I just think it's football and injuries happen.
Yeah, me too. They have been but prior to this year, they were, I think, like the most injured team since 2019 in that span. So it is something to the Giants potentially being more injured than other teams.
I wonder if MetLife factors into that.
Like MetLife could factor in, though. We've said this before, and then people come back at us like there's no data that suggests the MetLife turf is actually leading to injuries. So, I mean, the data doesn't support that. I think you could also look at past GMs and say that, they could be drafting injury-prone players potentially, because that was never like with Jerry Reese. He never really worried too much about the injury history. Had tons of picks that had injury histories that didn't work out. Same thing really for Gettleman. At times, he wasn't really too keen on factoring in the injury situation, especially if it's like a Kadarius Toney type who was injured most of his career at Florida. So it's also the players you draft, but I think it's just mostly luck is what it comes down to.
And also, Joe Schoen is averse to drafting injured players. And look at Darian Beavers, Marcus McKethan, DJ Davidson. A lot of the guys are already done.
Yeah, and they already got hurt. Right.
Exactly. So it's some bad luck. And also, I'll say this, and I think you're 100% right, Dan. The Giants are injured, but the Giants have also been terrible and have been out of it. And I think that kind of leads to some guys who maybe could have rehabbed and come back, maybe just mailing it in. And that's not a knock on them. It's just like, why risk it for a team that has 2 wins in December,
Right. Yep. Great point. Okay. DJ Gagliardo also asks, what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger? It can be anything.
Dan, you want to tackle this one first? This is a deep question, man. I didn't look at these questions. We don't look at these questions beforehand, and this is deep. So
we never look at it. It's all freestyle, so it might not be our best answers. But I'll start by saying, I wish I knew I should buy Apple stock. No, that's the easy one, right? You just buy the stock. I'll say this: one thing I wish I knew when I was younger that I know now is be yourself and enjoy being yourself and enjoy liking the things in life that you like. Don't worry so much about what other people think is cool, about what other people think you should be doing with your life, with your time. Because guess what? When you decide to do the things that you enjoy doing with your time, you're not hurting anyone. You're probably helping people because you're probably doing those things with people who enjoy them too. And you're making their life better as they make your life better. And the only thing you lose is social consequence, right? Like, oh, this is not a cool thing to do, or you should be doing this, you should be doing that. So I would say one thing I've learned that when I was younger, this mattered more to me what other people thought of me in this regard, and just like doing things that were quote unquote, to be cool or whatever, or to be like popular. I don't even know, that's not the right word. I never tried to be popular, but just like things that are suggested to you or the things that people expect of you. So I would just say be yourself and try to do the things that you enjoy.
I think that's a great one. It's probably the number one.
Yeah.
I would also say enjoy the little things a little bit. And also just like little things like time with your grandparents and stuff like that, which I tried to do as I was entering my 20s. But when you're in like your late teens and your early 20s, you kind of like neglect that, and then they're
True.
gone, and it's like, oh shit, there's no getting that back. So I would just say enjoy the little things with the people who are most important to you.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Okay, deep question there from TJ Gagliardi. We'll go back into some Giants questions here. Nico Recent asks, I got three. One, are the Giants sellers or buyers? Two, what have you seen on film from a progressive standpoint, or from what you've seen on film, who would you predict to have the most impact to come this season that hasn't had it yet? And then with Kafka in the booth, how is the communication between the quarterback and offensive coordinator aside from the play calling?
Let's tackle the first one. On the Giants, sellers or buyers in 2 weeks? I think they could sell Kadarius Toney. That seems like it's starting to gain a little steam, but I don't know if that makes them sellers. And I think if the right deal were to come, they would be buyers, but I don't think we should slap labels on it. I think Joe Schoen is just going to look at every situation independently. So I'm not going to really say they're sellers or buyers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What you've seen on film, who would you predict to have the most? Okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, the best impact. Yeah, like it's basically like who's been kind of sneaky good on film that hasn't broken out yet type of question.
Okay, so last year would have been somebody like a Dexter Lawrence. Like Julian Love, I feel like constitutes for this question, right? But like he just really had a huge breakout game. So I think going with someone like Julian Love makes sense. You would hope Evan Neal would be grouped into this. I would hope when Azeez Ojulari comes back, he seems to be a guy that we're somewhat forgetting about because Dexter Lawrence is playing so well and Kayvon Thibodeau is playing so well. So those are names that I want to kind of throw out there. But I think if I had to choose one, it would be Julian Love, who is in a contract here, who is also a special teams captain on this team, who consistently makes plays. Some of them aren't as important on the stat sheet, but they're huge to the Giants winning football games. So I think Love is the choice for me.
That's an interesting question. Because like someone like Love, I'm not sure he's going to like stuff the stat sheet or in that regard, but I kind of agree with you. He's going to make even more big plays, as we saw in this last game against the Ravens, where he made multiple game-changing plays. So that's a good call. I'll go with a kind of somebody who I've liked what I've seen on film, but hasn't made a huge impact yet, and that would be Tanner Hudson. I think there's going to be situations coming up this season where Tanner Hudson makes a big catch or gets open on a key down and makes a catch, just because I really like how he's separated on tape, and I really like his movement skills and his lateral agility. So I would go with Hudson.
And I think there are two at the respective positions that we chose that can also kind of be grouped in here. Yeah. And Daniel Bellinger, because Daniel Bellinger, Giant fans love him because Giant fans see, but he doesn't really have the national type of recognition now. You're starting to hear on like fantasy podcasts being like, wow, this rookie Daniel Bellinger is pretty good. But the way the Giants are using him, he could truly break out and be like one of the tight ends in like fantasy football that you want to own, just because his snap share is going up and he's so used in the red zone and he's such a pivotal blocker for the New York Giants. So he's always on the field. So I think Daniel Bellinger can be grouped in there. And then I think Dane Belton can be grouped in there because Dane Belton, he plays a lot of snaps. Wink Martindale wants him out there, and I think he's going to come away with an interception soon because he positions himself well on the football field. And the way he just even passed off the Patrick Ricard route and then sank underneath Mark Andrews on the one play in the red zone that went off of his hands, that could have easily have been an interception on Lamar Jackson. And I think plays like that, which we saw all throughout his Iowa tape, I think they're going to start coming away with turnovers. And I think Dane Belton is a name that we should pay attention to relative to this question that was asked.
That's a great one. As far as the communication between the quarterback and the offensive coordinator, I would imagine I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but I would imagine that there's like a two-pronged process where Kafka can call down to Daniel Jones in between series.
He has a radio in the helmet. Daniel Jones has the communication with Kafka from the booth, and he tells him what plays to run. And that's one of the reasons, the primary reason why when they're in Wildcat, you have Daniel Jones outside of the numbers just taking away a receiver. But again, man, I want Daniel Jones to have it would be awesome for Daniel Jones to have a touchdown pass where like the cornerback doesn't really pay attention. Like the Giants go into a Wildcat. Saquon Barkley runs to the Daniel Jones side. That cornerback pays attention to Saquon Barkley because he's Saquon Barkley. And then Saquon Barkley throws it over the cornerback's head in like a cover one type of situation. Daniel Jones gets a touchdown reception. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be something. All right, we'll finish this off with a little rapid fire fun ones from Jake Andrews first. And you could just go yes, no. And if you want to expand on them, you can, Nick. Does sour cream belong in chili?
Yes. If you want to put anything in chili, you want to put chips in chili, do your thing, man. Be you.
Okay. Do you dip the wings or just the celery?
You could dip the wings and the celery. Yeah,
no,
man.
But just you. These are questions for you, Nick.
Yes. So do I dip the wings or just the celery? I don't really have wings too often, but I would dip both when I do. What about you?
I'll answer all these after. Okay. Cheese on or in a hot dog?
So if I were to eat a hot dog, I think you can put both. I think both fit. If you're going to
When's the
eat
last time
cheese,
you had a hot dog, Nick?
yeah. So actually, I didn't have one long ago. So I went to Portillo's is a huge place in Chicago, Illinois, right? And for whatever reason, they have 3 shops out here in the valley, and one of them is in Avondale, a town right next to where I live. So I was just like driving through the area, and I was like, I've heard so much about Portillo's. Let me go and get a hot dog. And I actually went. I got a hot dog. It had freaking tomatoes and a pickle on it. It was weird, and I gotta say, it was pretty good. I liked it. So that was the last. But before that, it's been years. I have no idea.
Portillo's beef is where it's at. Next time you go there, I think
I got the beef. I got the beef too. Diana ended up getting or I ended up getting so she got like the sandwich, the beef sandwich. I ended up getting it just in a tray. It was just beef in a tray. And I felt like a dog eating it. I thought it was good. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, sausage was better in my opinion though.
Okay. And then hot sauce on a pizza. Do you do hot sauce on your pizza ever?
I don't. I'm a huge hot sauce fan. So I love hot sauce, but hot sauce on pizza is not something that I tried.
Hot pastrami grilled or microwaved? Ew.
I think grilled. Yeah, I think it has to be.
Disgusting. Carrots in Chinese food. Will you eat them or just pick around them?
No, I'll eat the carrots in Chinese food. Yeah.
And have you ever had good chicken tenders at a stadium?
I don't think I've really ever had chicken tenders at a stadium, so I don't know. Are they good though? I'm not sure.
I'll answer these. Sour cream, not in my chili. I'm not a sour cream guy at all. I will dip the wings if it's blue cheese, not if it's ranch. Cheese in a hot dog, no, but cheese in a brat, yes. Hot sauce on pizza, I've never had that, but I like hot sauce. Maybe I should try that. Hot pastrami, definitely grilled. I think one of my strong takes is microwaving is disgusting and ruins everything. I'd rather eat cold Chinese or cold pizza than microwave, not Chinese, but microwave pizza. I don't like microwave. I think it sucks. It takes the crisp out of every food you can ever eat. Carrots in Chinese food, I'll eat them. Sure, they're drenched in all that sauce, whatever. But I'm not a big fan of Chinese food either. I'll be honest. Even though I live in the only area where it's even feasible, like New York, New Jersey area, in my opinion at least. Look, I had Chinese freshman year of college. Me and shout out my friend Mike Collins. We tried 5 different Chinese places in Madison, Wisconsin. The first 5 football Sundays, we would watch football and eat Chinese food. All 5 times they were miserably bad. He threw up 2 of those 5 times. And yeah, that's how bad this Chinese food was outside. Maybe it's gotten better out there, but you can't really eat Chinese food off the coasts. But I don't really like Chinese food. I prefer Thai over Chinese food. I'm a big fan of the quality of meat when I'm eating.
The West Coast is pretty good with Chinese food.
Coast,
it's not that great out here. It's not that great out here, but I went to a Vietnamese place out here, which was really good. So like we found some good Vietnamese places in the valley, but Chinese food. I haven't tried sushi yet though. This is a landlocked state, even though people.
I wouldn't go sushi in Arizona probably, but maybe.
I'm gonna try it one time. If you come out here, Dan, maybe we'll go. I've heard of some good places from people who aren't from like Arizona, so maybe they are good.
Sure. And then chicken tenders at the stadium. Nah, I don't really go for the chicken tenders ever. I like trying to get some of the other foods. But thank you for all the questions, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. It's the Big Blue Banter podcast. It's the mailbag. You'll be hearing this over the weekend, most likely, or if you watch on YouTube, thank you for liking, subscribing, all that good stuff. Otherwise, have a great rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you soon, and let's get to 6-1, baby.